What I'm holding here is a very special loaf of bread. This is actually the first bread that I've ever baked myself, and I think it turned out pretty well. But what makes this bread so special is it's taken me over a year to make this bread. And that's because none of the ingredients were bought from the store. Everything is home harvested. I started this project over a year ago when I planted wheat. I harvested it, ground the wheat into flour, used a sourdough starter. I even went to the ocean and boiled down seawater to get the salt. So in this video, you're going to see the entire process of what it takes to bake your own bread without going to the store and growing all the ingredients yourself. So last November, I spread wheat out on a couple acres behind my house, and it's actually grown pretty well. Now this is much more weedy and smaller heads than conventional farming, but we can still get quite a bit of crop out of it. Now harvesting it's going to be pretty labor intensive. Modern farming, they use a combine, it collects it all, it threshes it, but here we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, which is pick each wheat head off and place it in a bowl, or for a much faster process, I have a hand tool. We'll just grab it. Well, harvesting the wheat by hand using this tool is actually a pretty quick process. It only took me a minute to completely fill up this large bowl. I've already collected 20 of these bowls and I still have 50 more to go. The real work though is separating the wheat from the chaff. So once we're done harvesting, I'll move on to the next step. Now we could thresh all this wheat by hand, but that would take a very long time, and I'm looking for a way to speed up the process. I searched on YouTube and found some great resources, especially a YouTube channel called The Seasonal Homestead, and they made a drill-powered thresher that looked like it worked pretty well. So I went to the workshop and I made a thresher out of a piece of threaded rod, and I attached 2 links of chain to it. I had to cut the sections of chains to the right length using a grinder, and then I attached them to the threaded rod with washers and nuts. And I made sure to use lock washers so they wouldn't back off. So here's the final result. Those spinning chains will break up all the chaff and the grain will settle to the bottom. Those chains are pretty heavy duty, so to make sure I have enough power, I'm using a drill that's on a cord versus a cordless, and we're gonna go ahead and work through all of this. I'm gonna transfer part of this to the bottom of the bucket. Then we'll place a lid on top to make sure things don't go flying out, and we'll start threshing. Okay, this is mostly an experiment at first. We'll see how it works. Well, it seems like it broke up the chaff pretty well, but we're gonna go ahead and dump it out and see how well it separated the grain. This process is almost like panning for gold. We'll give it some shakes and hopefully all that wheat seed drops to the bottom. The wheat seed just gets more and more pure as you do this. I'm going to go ahead and blow some air on this to see if the chaff will just float away. Well, I'm actually really surprised how easy it was to clean the wheat to this point with that drill thresher and the bucket system. This works well. Obviously, I have some more cleaning to do, but overall, we're getting a huge harvest and it's not taking that much time. I have quite a bit of wheat to do, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then we'll finish threshing, maybe run it through a screen, and we can start making bread. We have our first batch of wheat that we're going to start cleaning, and I'm going to use these sieves here. I am going to save all this and feed it to the chickens. Just anything we miss will still go to use. Now here's the first batch of wheat I've cleaned. I still have a lot more to process. It's very time consuming, but when I'm done, I'll have several airtight jars full of this type of wheat. As you can see inside, it's not perfect. There's a few berries in there that still have their husks on. Before I bake, I'll go through by hand and pick out the larger pieces, but for the most part, this is just about ready. Now there's quite a different variation in types of wheat, and you want to make sure to cook the right kind of wheat for what recipe you're doing. This variety is known as soft white. It's lower in gluten, and it's better for things like cookies and pasta, but it's not great for baking bread. I also grew different kinds, including this variety. This is hard red wheat. It has more gluten and it's better for baking bread. And a third variety I grew this year is known as einkorn. Einkorn is an ancient grain. I've been growing this for many, many years. I posted a video 8 years ago of all the different ancient grains I'm growing. And it's really fun to have different varieties to test out. I might blend them to make different flours and see how they turn out. But for now, we're going to use the hard red wheat that we grew to make bread. Now you can bake bread with just a few ingredients, including wheat flour like this whole grain. You also need water, salt, and a starter. A starter is a sourdough starter that helps you ferment the bread. And to get that, I'm going to go online and purchase some. We'll feed it, get it going, and then we can start making the bread. I just received my sourdough starter that I purchased from a seller on Etsy. They ship it in this pint-sized canning jar, and as you lift off the lid, it's slightly pressurized and it smells amazing. It smells like fermentation, slightly sour, and that tells me inside are living organisms that are hungry. Now, just like I have to feed my chickens food and water to get eggs, I have to feed and water this starter. Especially after being in the mail for a couple days, it comes with 100 grams of starter, and to feed it, you give it 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of filtered water. So we're going to go to the kitchen and get some of the wheat that I grew this summer, the wheat berries. We're going to grind them in the KitchenAid mixer into fresh milled flour. We're going to feed here our starter, also some filtered water, let it sit at room temperature and watch it grow. My daughter Ruby loves to help me make the flour. She'll place the wheat berries, the einkorn, in the hopper on the KitchenAid mixer and it will grind it into flour. Let's turn it on and start grinding flour. Okay, Ruby? We have a very large bowl of freshly ground einkorn flour that Ruby helped me with. We have our starter. I'm going to go ahead and take off the lid and place it on the scale. First, I'll turn it on and make sure it's set to grams. Right there. Now the jar and the starter is 348 grams, but we're going to go ahead and tear that to 0 because we know 100 grams inside are the starter. So we're going to match this and we want 100 grams of flour. $99, just one more tap. 100. I'm going to go ahead and use this knife and mix it up. Now we're going to place it back on the scale and tear it to 0 again and add 100 grams of filtered room temperature water. 101, close enough. We'll make sure this is thoroughly mixed, leaving no clumps on the bottom. Our brand new sourdough starter is now fed and thoroughly mixed. The jar is pretty full, so I'm going to transfer it to a larger jar. Then we'll place it on the kitchen counter. We'll put a cheesecloth for a lid and we'll watch it grow. Well, it's now the end of the day and look at how happy our starter is. It's grown quite a bit and it's completely full of bubbles. It's very active. We're going to be feeding this every single day and keeping it going. And we're going to use this starter to bake a lot of bread. Now that we have active sourdough starter and 100% freshly ground whole grain wheat flour, we're ready to make our very first loaf of bread that's 100% self-harvest. We also need some salt, and this salt is special because I took my family to the beach and we harvested seawater, boiled it down, and made our own sea salt. And we also need some room temperature water. Now the instructions and the recipe on how to make this bread, I learned entirely from a YouTube channel called Grant Bakes. On his channel, he has so many helpful videos on how to make bread, and one specifically on how to make whole wheat sourdough bread. And that's the video I'm following step by step. This is my first time making this bread, and we'll see if it turns out. Now for the ingredients, you want to make sure you weigh them out instead of measure them. You get a more accurate reading, and you start with 325 grams of water. We'll dump that in the bowl. Next, we're going to add 10 grams of our salt and 100 grams of our starter. And then with a spoon, I'm going to make sure we get it all in the bowl. We're going to mix it up. Now we're going to start with all the wet ingredients and make sure they're thoroughly blended. That way there's no clumps. And now we can add our freshly ground hard red wheat. And for this, I'm using 450 grams. We'll add that in. And make sure we mix it thoroughly. You don't want to overwork the dough, but you want to make sure it's thoroughly mixed. Once it looks like this, we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes. We'll place a towel on the top. It's been 30 minutes and we're going to start stretching and folding our dough. Just kind of pull it off the bottom here. Just like that. Give it a quarter turn. Okay, now that it's stretched and folded, we're going to go ahead and cover it again and let it sit for 30 minutes. Okay, after 30 minutes, we're going to give it 4 more stretch and folds. And as the air bubbles start to develop, I'm going to be more gentle with this. Kind of pull, stretch, fold, do a quarter turn. Now we'll cover it again and let it sit for 30 more minutes. After another 30 minutes, we'll do another stretch and fold. And cover it again. It's been 30 minutes. We're going to do one more stretch and fold and be very gentle with this one. Now we're going to let it go through its first full fermentation or rise. We're going to wait till it doubles in size. That could take over 4 hours or more. It's been several hours and our dough has more than doubled in size, and so now we're ready to shape. We're going to begin by sprinkling the top with some flour. Now we're going to remove it from the bowl and place it on our mat. And we're going to start shaping it, tucking in the bottoms, rounding it out. Now we're going to let it sit for 30 minutes. Our dough is rested for 30 more minutes and we're now ready to shape it and place it in our proofing basket. We're going to want to thoroughly cover this basket with flour to make a non-stick surface. And we're also going to cover our dough. Now we're going to flip it over so the sticky side is up. Now that our dough is shaped and placed in the basket, we're going to proof it overnight in the fridge. The next morning, we take our dough out of the fridge, place it on some parchment paper, and score a cross mark on the top. We then place our dough in a pot that's been preheated and cover it with the lid. Then bake it in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Then we remove the lid and you can see it burst open on the cross pattern. That's called oven spring. We'll slide the bread back in the oven with the lid off to cook for 15 more minutes. And when it's done, we'll pull it from the oven and let it cool for an hour. Well, the bread's cooled and it looks amazing. This was a lot of work and I can't wait to cut into it, see what it looks like from the inside. It's got a lot of air bubbles in there. It's actually pretty soft for being a whole grain bread and it looks amazing. I can't wait to cut off a slice, eat it with some honey. We'll put a little honey from my beehives. If you want to see that whole process, that's my last video. I have 2 hives and they produce quite a bit of honey for the first year. And this is 100% home harvested. The honey, the bread, everything. Let's give it a taste. The flavor of this bread is amazing. It's pretty complex with the sourdough. It's really good with the honey. It'd be good with jam or as a side with soup. And it's great just to snack on by itself. Like I said, this was my very first attempt at baking bread, and I feel it was a huge success. I'm sure I made quite a few mistakes. Leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions. This is part of my journey of making as much of my own food as possible, nothing bought from the store. I have a huge garden, I've been raising all kinds of animals, and now I'm baking my own bread. It's really important that you know where your food comes from, and this is not hard to do yourself. So much of the food you eat now has ingredients you can't name, all kinds of dyes, additives, preservatives. This is really simple, homemade food with 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. And everything was home harvested. Talk about homegrown and local. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see my other videos on making my own food without going to the store for any of the ingredients, I'll put a playlist down below. And I really, really appreciate that you watched. Thanks again.